Good morning.
Good morning.
Try that again. Good morning.
Good morning.
Awesome. Thank y'all. My name is, as she said, my name is McHugh David. I'm the publisher of the newspaper. 3 years ago, my father died of lung cancer. 3 months after that, our editor, Mike Doty, died of a stroke. So in the span of 90 days, we lost 88 years of newspaper experience. So it was a tough time for me and my mother and my family. We've done the best that we could and continue to sort of expand sort of beyond the newspaper. We have a website, an app, and we utilize social media best as we can. This is sort of something new that we came up with. We have a graphics design artist. His name is Paul Hatton. He is British. But he had this real cool idea of let's put moments that we have and photographs from the newspaper inside the silhouette of the parish. So we sort of adopted that and have run with it. I actually found out recently that WAFB and WBRZ follow us very closely. We had an error in one of our stories that caused the folks at LEDC, I don't know if y'all have been there yet, to freak out because WAFB called them for an interview and they were like, "This is wrong." I said, "Well, this is what it said." "Well, we need to correct that." "Great, I think that's a good idea." So we have adopted the moniker of your community news source. We try to stay on top of things. In 1998, my dad ran a series of history. You'll see some of it in this presentation about the paper, which is actually the history of the parish after 1898, which is when the paper was founded as the Denham Springs News. He changed the name then to the Livingston Parish News because things were starting to expand. We'll also cover that in a little bit. So we all know about this. We're kind of removed from it now. This presentation had a lot more pop last year. If you're wondering where that picture is, it's right down there at the corner of Veterans and Florida Boulevard, which is right there at the bottom of the frame. And that's just all muddy water. And of course, this has always been sort of an interesting front for me for a lot of reasons. I laid it out sitting in water at a kitchen table because we were still going to get the paper out. Unfortunately, the post office kind of let us down during that time, but that's understandable. A lot of people were going through a lot of things. Of course, the I-12 barrier wall is still a thing. People are still fighting about it. If you're wondering where that sits, they're still in the discovery phase, which means they're still collecting evidence. Anybody who expected that to be quick was... Yes, that's a good word for it. Thank you for saying it. I didn't have to. And of course, in the bottom right, that's just, we had a guy at the time who moved on for his dream job running a downtown area, actually, in New Roads. His name was Tommy, and he went and talked to a bunch of people at shelters and talked about, what they had been through that day afterwards. It was a rough time. As you can see, this is as we continue to experience the emotion of what comes after such an event. That picture of that teacher always is kind of haunting to me. It's just very overwhelming. Damage numbers continue to rise. A tough scenario. So this is 1977. If you are wondering where this is the corner. This is Florida Boulevard, and that's Rushing Road, okay? So this is La Frontera Grocery, right here, okay? You can't see it. It did, in fact, cut it off, but at the very top it says parish damage set at 14 million, okay? 14 million, right? Not billion or anything like that. $14 million in 1977. Excuse me. So a couple of things that should be noted here from a civic standpoint. The permit issued for a temporary gas line. If those of you who know anything about civil funding, maybe you do, maybe you don't, a lot of funding for the Denham Springs budget came from their gas business. Up until probably the mid-90s, Denham Springs actually served Hammond Air Shopping Center, which is at the corner of Airline and Old Hammond Highway. They gave a lot of people a lot of gas, so after the flood, it was a huge deal for them to get the gas line over the Amite River repaired. It had broken, which was a problem in and of itself. Some other things, volunteer agencies offer relief aid. We all know after the flood, churches, Red Cross, that kind of thing. Huge deal. It was a huge deal back then, too. If these headlines look familiar, feel free to stop me, okay? I mean, the exact same thing that happened in 1977. I mean, this is a front page from 1977. If it looks familiar, like I said, feel free to stop me. It's almost the exact same scenario post-flood, okay? It even goes down here, tips for flood damage, right? So there are all these stories going around after the flood happened. Here's how you gut your house. Here's how you treat it, blah, 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 blah. They had that right here 40 years ago, absolutely amazing. The other thing, that I wanted to throw out there is, have y'all visited the parish council yet? Okay. One of the things that they have is the road program. They're very strict now on who they allow in terms of new streets. As you can see, they had the same problem in 1977. They couldn't afford, people would build a subdivision, and a lot of times they wouldn't accept them in because it either didn't meet code or they didn't have the money to keep it up, because that's their job. So, right here, we're talking about the cost estimate right over there on the right, okay? This is the beginning of the Comite River Diversion Canal, along with another project, okay? They have begun to, what's the best way to put it? They have begun to discuss it. They are in contemplative discussions about a multi-million-dollar project. Of course, it's cut off, but in the bottom there, that's a column by my dad, who said that, if we're going to sit on top of the cost of these projects, that's bad priorities, because, he had lived through both floods. That would be 77 and 83. And it just didn't sit well with him. That was a bad priority. So, and all these statistics are cut off, so I'm going to read them for you. That's Garrett Graves, in case you were wondering. He is, for probably most of you, he is your congressman. So one of the first things he said when he came into office, and I was still working the editorial desk, is the cost of disaster prevention is almost 3 times less than the cost of disaster recovery. That number has actually grown in recent years. It's up to 5.5 as opposed to 3. And it's sort of, it shows itself in these numbers, okay? So in 1977, it was 37.2 feet was the crest of the Amite River. It was $14 million in damage, okay? I'm sorry, you see the $14 million, so I'm not lying to you. In 1983, it was 41.5 feet, and it was $83.8 million, okay? So that's an extra 3.5 feet or 3.9 feet. Also jacks it up about $70 million, okay? There's the number there. 2016, 46.2 feet, 20 plus billion. Of course, it is very hard to calculate that number these days. Those of you who either maybe watched it on TV, you read it in our paper, they recently filtered through and applied for 10 homes for either elevation or reclamation, I guess is the best way to put it. And they are waiting for an answer. That would be the city of Denham Springs, and they're waiting for an answer for that. The interesting part about reclamation is that those people no longer live here, spend money here, or pay property taxes. Okay, those homes that apply for reclamation and are approved, they're wiped out. Okay, that is forever green space by law. Okay, you have to get him to help you if you ever want to build a house there. He'd be part of the process. Interesting to note about him, and I forgot to add that he got into it with the Corps of Engineers since he joined Congress, and during this past year, 2018, he was named the chair of the subcommittee which has jurisdiction over the Corps of Engineers. So it's kind of funny, I guess. Eventually, you get to boss around the person you got in a fight with. He actually wrote a lot of the new law that will take effect in 2019 so that they'll spend more money, move more dirt, as opposed to all the studies they do, which wastes a lot of money. So again, it's cut off. I do apologize. In the top right, we're talking about the Amite and Comite River diversion canals. In the top left. In the top right, we're talking about the Darlington Reservoir. Who has ever heard of Darlington Reservoir? Okay, anybody? Good, we got at least one. I was hoping you would have. So that would be in between Clinton, Louisiana, and Greensburg, Louisiana, on a small stretch of road, Highway 10. There's a place called Darlington. It is in the middle of nowhere, okay? But there is a place where they determined they could build a dam, okay? This was in 1989. The cost was $189 million, okay? In today's dollars, if you calculate for inflation, it's about $360 million. I don't know about you, that still seems a lot cheaper than $20+ billion. But at the time, why didn't it happen? Budget, lack of funding, and the pushback from area locals, okay? If you're wondering why area locals push back on it, just look at why, area locals push back on, say, the loop through Watson, okay? It changes the whole lay of the land in a specific area. They were expecting, new businesses to pop up, new homes, more people. They didn't want it at the time, okay, 1989. I guess if you were living in Darlington in 1989, you really wanted to be by yourself, so I get it. Anyway, over on the left, you have the Amite and Comite River Diversion Canal. The Amite, at this point, the diversion canal existed, not in its current form, and the rich ditch, as people in real estate like to call it. But the Comite is more of what I'm focused on because it didn't exist at all. It still doesn't, obviously. It was $100 million, about $300 million in today's dollars, as you know. They finally secured funding. Of course, now it costs so much more because new roads have been built in the area, new homes. People now, it's large swaths of land are held by large families, and it's hard to get them all to agree on a price, especially if one person is particularly greedy. Money, okay? Money. Louisiana, money, of course. Why not? It's the same old story. It's a different day. They said we didn't have the money then, and we paid for it. Granted, it took quite a few years for us to pay for it. It was, I guess that would have been 34 in between one and the other. But it still cost a lot. So I've discussed all that, talking about how we got here. So the history of at least my paper with regard to Livingston Parish. You will hear from Sam Hyde after me. He's a way better presenter than I am, and really hilarious. He will talk about the time leading up to 1898 when this man, George Minton, founded our paper. He was a very smart gentleman. He came to Denham Springs and realized, they're missing a couple of things, so I'm going to open a bank, a college, and a newspaper. And he proceeded to get quite wealthy very quickly. The story behind this picture, actually, we didn't have it. They were remodeling a home in downtown, right behind downtown Denham Springs by the Methodist Church. And the lady called my dad, this was in the early 90s actually, and said, I think we found a picture of George Minton. And my dad had a replica from his obituary actually, but not one like as large as this one. This is an 8x10. And he said, and said some wonderful, colorful words, and he said, that's him, and brought it back and framed it. And so that's my forebear. This is his obituary. He's just like a lot of people. He died young. Not young, I'm sorry. His wife died young. He died at 75. He was born in 1851. He went to the north for college, came back, started a slew of businesses, and here we are. The bank he started was First Bank of Livingston, which eventually was bought out by Hancock. I love this one. You can you can ignore the clearing Hornsby of charges. I mean, people getting in trouble around here, politicians, is nothing new. The interesting thing is, how many of you work for the sheriff's office, have worked with the sheriff's office, know what the sheriff's office is? Okay, we all know what the sheriff's office is. Okay, he has roughly 500 employees, most of which he considers deputies. That is the first time the sheriff ever had deputies. This is in 1954. He had 6 of them, okay, from 6 to 500, okay. So this was we took a huge picture and put it on the front page because this was huge. This was a big deal. You will learn from Sam that one of the things leading up to points like this one was an interesting thing he likes to call "he had it coming." There's a lot of violence in this area. It was relatively unpoliced. Not very good in terms of getting people in front of judges and getting them thrown in jail. The jails were also underfunded too. So when you have a guy show up with six deputies, suddenly it's a decision to take law enforcement more seriously, which was a big deal in this area. Okay, integration. There it is. Okay, in 1965. Okay. It's an important milestone for Livingston Parish because, as you know, a huge motion of growth here is based around the schools. Okay, safe place to live, great place to send your kids to school, and this was just part of their history. Now, I always say this because it makes April happy. Right there in the middle, Denham Springs Mayor tells Chamber town in good shape. Okay, like she said, the Chamber started in 1920. They're in and out of the headlines for a lot of different reasons. But this was in 1965. This is in the 80s. We found oil here. Okay, anybody who knows a Barnett will know that this is their wells are off Lockhart Road. Okay, Highway 16 in that area. It was huge. It brought a lot more people here, a lot of blue collar folks for work, and of course I always find this interesting. I just wrote a column about election participation is particularly bad, especially for runoffs. And this one, runoff participation was greater than the primary, which is fascinating. That never happens. That's huge. Okay. Now it's changed a little bit in recent years, but this was in 1992 when the school board passed that they were going to give teachers here a raise, and they were now going to be paid more than teachers in Baton Rouge. So there was a huge influx of new teachers at the end of, or in between these two school years, 1992 and 1993 school year over the summer. Because it was, say, at this point, we have the 6 deputies. At this point, I'm sure it's way more than 6. But it's safe, the schools are better, and now they pay more. So that was a big deal. Bass Pro, that's what that hook, line, and sinker is. Okay, that's, I can't, it's hard to describe economically how much that changed this parish. A lot of people were curious and concerned about the TIF, which is tax incremental financing. We actually found out Friday that they are about $18 million short of paying off those bonds, which were roughly $80 million in the onset. Everyone from the school board to the city of Denham Springs to the state of Louisiana stands to gain. It's important to remember that when they did the tax incremental financing, that was money that we didn't have. Okay, it wasn't like you were giving up revenue you already had. You were pulling out of your coffers. I mean, there was nothing there. It was a giant field, I remember. So the lowest is the sheriff stands to gain about $300,000. City of Denham Springs stands to gain about $1.2 million, and the state of Louisiana stands to gain about $4 million, and that's per year. That's how much money goes through that Bass Pro development. That is centralized around a Denham Springs Economic Development District, which includes all of the shops along along what is, I guess you can call it, Bass Pro Boulevard. That includes Sam's, Cavender's, all those restaurants, and there's more to come. That, of course, opened the door for Jubin Crossing, which has made a huge deal with retail and, of course, tech sales. So, Katrina, right? That's Katrina, in case you were wondering. It says Katrina across the top for y'all. That just looks like a cloud. But of course, Katrina was devastating. It was horrible. It caused a lot of problems. For those of you who have gotten screwed by the duplication of benefits issue, that partially exists because of people gaming the system after this terrible storm. So, thank them for that. But after that, the influx of population was immense here. If any of you were living in this area at that time, you'll remember the fights for gas, fights for hotel rooms. The interesting thing is once the dust settled, a lot of people didn't actually end up in Baton Rouge. They ended up in Houston and Atlanta. We're two big hubs where people live, but it increased the population here. There are a lot of Katrina transplants. June Crossing. Okay, we talked about it. This is academy being built, the tax revenue that is coming through here is huge. Okay, the parish is collecting $1.2 million more per month in sales tax than it was in 2005. Okay, $1.2 million per month. All right, that's a lot. So, looking at population, because I was talking about how did we get here? How did this cost go up so much for these floods? It's quadrupled since 1970. And we actually have new numbers. It's about 146,000 people live here now. And they're expected for that to get up to about 160 in the next 2 years. That puts us squarely ahead of Tangipahoa by 22,000 and Ascension by 18,000. Another picture of the wall. It's always good just to show people this. Apparently, that's not an admission of guilt. I don't know what to tell you. And then you look at this. I mean, how many subdivisions do you know that exist like that? Since 1999 till now, the number of homes has grown just at such a rapid rate. Currently, the real estate agents here and from other places who sell here are moving about 110 new homes per month are being sold. If you average it out to 3 people per home, you can see where the growth is coming from. I love this front. This was a year after the flood. It's kind of it's sort of a counterpoint to the one that I showed you. At the top, we had a press conference where John Kennedy was kind enough to get Dr. Ben Carson, who is the HUD director, to come take a look around. Of course, it's been a year and a half since then, and they're still trying to get the duplication of benefits pushed through. But we had a bunch of guys come through and talk about it. Now we have happy teachers because a lot of schools are kind of getting back going. Community college announced, and actually this was such a crazy day because that day as well, when we were covering all this and laying it out, was the Chamber State of the Parish was that day as well. And we got to hear from Leighton, who, as it says, was optimistic about the parish's future, and he had good reason to be, as long as it doesn't flood again. So, that is my presentation on where we came from and how we got here. Any questions?